In this tutorial I'd like to show you how to make a Mukarnas composition. Mukarnas come in all shapes and sizes, and they are different in appearance and certainly different in the way they are constructed depending on which part of the world they're from. The Mukarnas composition that we're going to make in this tutorial is mostly associated with compositions that you would find in Iran. There are other kinds of methods of construction that are very different, which you would, for example, see in North Africa or in Syria or Lebanon. But in this tutorial we'll be looking at a construction method that's typical for the Iranian world. So they come in all shapes and sizes, and you can see very large Mukarnas compositions, for example, in Friday Mosque of Isfahan, or much smaller compositions in the Ali Mosque in Isfahan, like you can see here. What you can see in this composition, which is particularly interesting, is that they're hanging from the ceiling. You can see that these Mukarnas units are attached to pieces of wood which have been cemented into the arched ceiling of the mosque, and they hang down essentially. Of course, when the whole composition is complete, you don't even see that the illusion is given that it's part of the structure, that it's a structural component to the building, but that's not the case. Mukarnas are really cosmetic devices, and the purpose that they serve is to make a smooth transition from, for example, a room with 90-degree angles on which might be a dome, and the zone between the straight walls and the curved dome, that transitional zone, you would use Mukarnas to make that a smooth transition. They're also used in other ways. So in the picture that we saw at the beginning of this tutorial, for example, you can see that it's also used to adorn the top of a column, like a capital, in fact. And that's also what we're going to be doing in this tutorial. We'll be making half a capital. It's useful to consider Mukarnas compositions as three-dimensional manifestations of two-dimensional Islamic geometric design. There are lots of similarities, and the way in which for centuries craftsmen in the Islamic world have used just a pair of compasses and a ruler to make very complex two-dimensional geometrical compositions. This same principle probably also applies to Mukarnas compositions. So the challenge for us is really to understand how craftsmen were able to make these very complex compositions, even though they only had very simple tools to do it. So that's also the purpose of this tutorial, to understand that a little bit better by making something. So the half capitals that we'll be making, the Mukarnas compositions that we'll be making, are two different ones, essentially. So you can see here's the first one, and you can see three tiers, hopefully, and this will become more clear as we progress. The other composition that we'll be making looks very similar. The difference between both of them is the top tier. So the bottom tier, the middle tier are the same. The top tier is different, and it's useful to be able to compare them with each other for reasons that will become apparent. The material that I'm using is mounting board, which is cardboard, and it's used for mounting or for framing artwork typically. But it's nice material to work with. It's rigid, but not too rigid, and it comes in lots of different colors. So it gives you an opportunity to contrast different elements from the composition. So here you can see the three tiers stuck into a vertical piece of cardboard. And how we make these I'll show in much more detail. But what you can see is when you put this piece of cardboard down and you look at the three tiers with a different perspective like this, you can see how they're all related when you draw them. So you can see, for example, that the smallest tier, the lowest tier, also appears in the pencil lines of the tier above it. And the middle tier also appears in pencil lines in the tier above it. And of course that's not a coincidence, it's because that's the way this composition is designed geometrically. Now, what defines the appearance of a Mukarnas composition is not just the shape of these tiers, but equally importantly is how these tiers are connected with each other visually. So the distance between each tier is one of those factors, and then the elements that connect it, the way they are made, is another of these factors. So this is what I'm using to connect the tiers with each other. These are little bits of cardboard that are of a particular height and width. They're identical, and I've chosen the length, the height. I've chosen the distance between the tiers. That's my choice. I think I've chosen 11.5 centimeters, but I could have chosen something else. And then the width of these tiers is determined by the geometrical composition that I've drawn, by the scale, by the dimensions of the geometrical compositions that I've drawn. The curve that I've chosen is also my choice. I've chosen just a simple quarter section of a circle, just to keep things simple for myself, but you could also choose something a bit more pointy, which would look quite nice, but there's a lot more fuss to draw. So I've drawn a lot of these because I need a lot of them. So the way they're used, I can show you, for example, here's the bottom tier of our composition, and I have glued 5 of these little cardboard sections to this piece, like so. So that's in principle how it works. So this is the basis for the Mukarnas composition. This is the plan. This is the drawing that forms the basis. So it's a very simple 8-pointed star, an 8-pointed star that you would see in many geometrical compositions across the Islamic world, on walls or in books or on metalwork. And for example, like here in the Fatih Mosque in Istanbul, it's ubiquitous. You would find this anywhere, and it's very simple to draw as well. What you can see in this next drawing is that I've grayed out the area which is essentially that vertical piece of cardboard that we saw. So because we're drawing half a capital, we're drawing half of this star to make the Mukarnas composition, and the grey area is the bit where the composition will be stuck to. So imagine that as the vertical bit of cardboard, if you will. So the first tier, we've already seen that. That's this little section. This is the bit that we saw where the vertical connectors were already glued onto. So this is what I would cut out in cardboard, and then I would attach these cardboard connectors to it, as you can see, these vertical sections. And then this is what it looks like when it's stuck into the vertical cardboard section. Now the middle tier, shown here in red, I've also cut out in cardboard, and when that has its vertical sections glued onto it, it looks like this. And then you can see the red cardboard. That's something that I add just to make it work as a composition, to make it more solid, which is what you want. So those are simple sections of cardboard that I've folded and glued along the pencil lines that I've used to make this composition in the first place. So then when you put this tier also into the cardboard, when you put that into, slot that into place, you can see how they connect with each other nicely. So the top tier, I'm doing 2 versions. This is the first version, and this is the more conventional one, if you will. And the reason it's more conventional is because I can also use the same vertical connectors as I did for the other tiers. So they're all the same width and the same height. And when I put them into place, that tier looks like this. Also with some bits of red cardboard that I've used to give it solidity, to make it visually more comprehensible. And then when you put all 3 tiers together, visually it would look like this. And of course it's evident that this pattern is very closely related to two-dimensional geometrical compositions. And then when it's put together, it looks like this. So you can see everything works together. It goes from narrow to wide as it moves upward. It's all connected. So that's version 1. This is version 2, where we use the half an octagon, this four-sided shape. And this is what it looks like. And then when you add the vertical connectors and the red cardboard, it looks like this. Now this is the less conventional version, and the reason it's less conventional is that I've had to trim the arched vertical sections a bit to make it all join up, because they need to be a bit shorter if they want to follow the shape of this half octagon, if you see what I mean. So I've had to tweak it, I've had to modify it a bit to make it work, but visually it works. And then when you put all three tiers together, it looks like this. So you can see these vertical sections that I've had to trim, you can see where they would belong on this plan. And then when it's all finished, it looks like this. So it's very similar to the first version. The bottom tier and the middle tier are the same, of course. It's just the top tier which is different, but it creates quite a different composition. So here are both top tiers, and when you put them together like this, it emphasizes again how closely Mukarnas are related to two-dimensional geometric design. This 8-pointed star that we see here, of course, is something that you would very frequently see being used two-dimensionally as part of a composition rather than as part of a structural plan, like in the case of these Mukarnas. So lastly, I want to show you how I attach these Mukarnas tiers to the cardboard. What I do, and what you've already seen probably, is that these three tiers all have little protrusions. These protrusions fit into slots that I've made into the cardboard. So I just stick them through the holes and put a pin in it, and it stays in place. Works quite nicely, it's not too difficult, you just have to be accurate, but it works quite well. This Mukarnas composition has a very simple structure. It's a two-dimensional geometrical composition which has been divided into three tiers, and these tiers are connected vertically, and that's what makes it a Mukarnas composition.